All right. Welcome everyone holding my Pirkei Avos, Ethics for Our Fathers. Again, welcome everyone holding my Pirkei Avos, Ethics for Our Fathers. We're in chapter 2, Mishnah 16. This is part 58. There'll be part 59 and part 60. I am sure, so I want to welcome everyone holding my Pirkei Avos, chapter 2, Mishnah 16. So the Mishnah says, again, in the name of Rabbi Yeshua, that an evil eye, evil inclination, hatred of other people, remove a person from this world. So we've been busy speaking about the last number of weeks about the evil inclination. And last week we mentioned there are two things the evil inclination does. Very good at its job. We never need to tell it what to do. Always does a good job. So the evil inclination wants two things. One is to scare a person, right? There are two sides here. A, to scare a person where they're going to be convinced, the person will be convinced that sin is so severe, they can't overcome it, right? There's no possible way to overcome it. There's no possible way to repent. So on one side of the coin, the evil inclination will say, not so bad. Right? Sorry, will say it's really bad. And you can't repent, right? God's never going to accept you. You keep doing it over and over again. There's no hope for you. As we always say, evil inclination is very good at what it does. On the other hand, what does evil inclination come and do? The opposite. Come to tell you, you're holding better, 95% of Jews in the world. You don't have to worry so much. Even if you sinned a little bit, okay, maybe even if it's severe, God's going to overlook that. And the reason he's going to overlook it is because, again, look at where most people are holding in the world. They'll say, that's not so bad, right? They'll say it's not so bad, right? So there are two sides of the same coin. On the one hand, or really opposite sides, let's say better, right? Really, you have the one side saying it's so bad you can't repent. The other side saying it's not so bad, right? That's what we spoke about. Last week. Now, mention something else here that the part of what the evil inclination does, as we mentioned last week, is to make a person feel totally inadequate, totally bad. They can't overcome certain things. God's never going to accept them. It's always bad, right? Always negative. Always negative. So the ultimate goal of the evil inclination is either a person is going to blow it off and say it's not so bad, or a person is going to be terrified and say it's so bad, there's no way to change, right? I can't change the outcome. God's never going to accept me. Yeah, but essentially, in both cases, one on the lenient side, one of the more, let's say, stringent side, what does the evil inclination want more than anything else? The evil inclination wants a person to be prevented from serving God. That's what it wants. Right? That's the ultimate goal. Now, he's got many ways of doing it. He can make you feel totally guilty, right? And paralyze the person, make a person not be able to do what they need to do, right? And they drown in their misery, so to speak. Or they just say, this is who I am. I'm holding better than most people anyway. It doesn't matter. But the resolve is, or let's give a third option, or person gets all excited, as well. This is my Q&A, so I don't want to dwell on it too much, right? But a person gets all excited, they're all fired up to keep Torah mitzvahs, and what happens? They fall flat in their face. They jump too high, too fast, try to do too much at the expense of other things, right? So in all these cases, it comes down to the same thing. The evil inclination comes and convinces the person, for better or for worse, not to serve God. That's what it does. Not to keep mitzvahs, and the person will be in a situation, whatever the situation is, where there's a lot of pressure, right? Where does the pressure come from? Pressure will come from family. Pressure will come from friends. Pressure will come from society. They'll tell you in any which way, what you're doing is crazy. You don't have to be so religious. Just be like everyone else, be a regular guy or a woman or whatever. Right? Be normal. Who says you got to be a fanatic? Religion's for fanatics. Don't be such a fanatic. Yeah, it's probably, halavai, right? That'd be the worst thing, that somebody says. But okay. So a person will get all excited. They feel they can't do everything, right? But there'll be peer pressure. And peer pressure is huge, right? What people will say, what they want you to do. And what do they want more than anything else? They want you to be the same as you were before. That is their ultimate goal, to convince you, to cool things down, so to speak. Yeah, a person all excited, they're all fired up. You get people say, okay, we want the old person to come back. Yeah, we don't want a person to get so excited because they're going to leave, right? They're going to leave our network, so to speak. They're going to leave our clique. They're going to leave, there's going to be one less person to go out with to do who knows what, right? So that will cool them down. And that is real pressure, right? Anyone who's been under it knows. People, as much as we think we are going to convince somebody else, they may try and certainly try and convince us. And then a person may think, and what's the worst thing? What's the worst thing? The worst thing is being in doubt. That is the worst thing. Right? Nothing worse than being in doubt. By the way, doubt, where does that come from? Doubt comes from Amalek. Right? Comes from Amalek. Amalek does not believe in supernatural, but the numerical value of Amalek, anyone who likes to play Gematria, right? The numerical value of Amalek, every letter has a number attached to it, right? Aleph is 1, Beis is 2, Gimel is 3. The numerical value of Amalek is the same as Suffolk, right? It's the same as doubt, right? And that's part of what the evil inclination wants also, that there's no clarity. There's no clarity. What do what does the person do in this situation? What are the ramifications? The person has many doubts. Yeah, many doubts. And even if you pick the right way, things to do, whatever it is, we always say, it doesn't mean you come out smelling like a rose. Even if you defend God and you keep what God says, there's a payback, right? There is going to be payback for that price. Now, most people will probably say the payback is worth it. Yeah, because, you're going to do what God says, right? And, someone will say, but, one of the 10 commandments, you got to honor your parents. Very good. So we always say, they're juxtaposition of verses, right? We learn out in the Torah from juxtaposition of verses. So we learn out that Torah comes along and says, you got to keep Shabbos. Well, I already know you got to keep Shabbos. Very good. And then the next verse says, or the verse before says, you got to honor your parents. Very good. So what's the connection? What's the connection between the two? So Rashi, other commentaries say, if a parent tells you that's a great job, you don't listen to them. Now, don't we want to try, if we have parents, try and have the best relationship we can, even under the circumstance where it's hard? Who doesn't? Right? Who doesn't want to still have a good relationship? Yeah, nonetheless, there can be a lot of pressure. Right? And they'll say, but you have to honor me. Right? One of the 10 commandments. I love hearing that. One of the 10 commandments. 10 commandments says you got to honor your parents. Very good. If they tell you to go kill someone, you have to honor them? No. They tell you to desecrate Shabbos. That's our case. They tell you to desecrate Shabbos. What's the mitzvah? The mitzvah is you don't listen to them. That is the mitzvah, regardless of what they say. They can jump up and down and scream and this and that. Doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Right? There's a total obligation not to listen to them. Absolutely not to listen to them. The problem is, maybe we find permissibility. Maybe it's not so forbidden. Maybe I can do it a different way. Maybe this, maybe that. Right? We want, what does the person want in this process? When they convert, they don't convert, doesn't really matter. What does the person want in this, in this, in this life, from family, whatever, when they change? What do they want more than anything else? Validation. They want acceptance. Yeah. So one of the best advice that I once got one of my rabbis, blessed memory, right, said that is something you probably never get. Not only won't you get it, you shouldn't expect it. Now again, that's painful. That's painful. If you don't have a good relationship with family, okay, so it doesn't matter, right? But if a person, even if they don't, but they want to try and have some sort of relationship, what ends up happening? This gets in the way, right? This will get in the way. Now, if the relationship is good, let's say, if the relationship was good already, so okay, maybe it's not going to go by the wayside. Maybe I don't know if it get better, let's say, but it doesn't have to be. And a person totally thrown under the bus and all that. It doesn't have to be that way. But can't end up that way, and probably does end up happening that way. But but in general, what a person wants acceptance, right? It makes sense. It definitely makes sense. On the other hand, it just may never come. And if it doesn't come, it should not be expected, right? Spoken about this, many times. But what's the point? The point is also part of the evil inclination. What does the evil inclination want? More than anything else, first of all, you're not going to keep Torah mitzvahs, or you're just going to get beaten down. But what does the evil inclination want? Start up machlokas, start up disagreements. In other words, it's not enough to agree to disagree. That person has family members, and Bible thumpers, and whatever. It's going to be much harder, much harder. Someone told me, having trouble, tremendous trouble financially. Family was helping them out, very good, or maybe not so good, depending how you look at it. And they basically said many times, you can only believe in JC, a situation would be better. And it's very hard to hear. Very hard to hear. It's one thing a person's is having difficulty, and let's say financially, in that sense, you don't want to hear someone give you just like the stupid advice to make you feel worse. Make you feel like worse than a piece of dirt. All right, you're already having difficulty. Very good. Yeah, so whatever a person's doing, not going so well, whatever the case is, doesn't really matter. But add insult to injury. First of all, let's say they are helping you. Okay, so you have to have gratitude. Very good. That kind of stings. It kind of stings because now they're telling you, see, you don't believe in JC. See, you don't believe in short fat guy. You don't believe in Buddha himself. Right, Mr. Fatso, they won't call him Fatso, but big mitzvah to make fun of idolatry. Nonetheless, they say you don't believe in him. Look, that's why you're having problems. That's why you're having problems. Or people say, listen, you're coming back to religion. Yeah. You're coming back to religion. Very good. They'll say, what did it bring you? They say, hey, wow, got a big family, got a lot of kids, grandkids. Okay. Well, look how you suffer in other ways. Right? Again, this is a mistake. People are going to say, if a person is quote unquote drawing close to God, so then why should a person have it hard? Right? Age-old question. We've spoken about this a lot, but that also stings because they're going to say, see, you're drawing close to God, you're trying all these things. Now they could say, obviously you're not doing something right. Obviously you're making mistakes somewhere down the line because look at the punishment you're getting. Look at the hardship that you're getting. Yeah. Now, why is that? Again, it could be for sin, no question. It could be test the person. Could be for many things, right? But that's not the point here, right? The point is, someone will say that. Now, they might be right to a point, right? They certainly might be right. They're just saying it to dig into you. But essentially, even if they are right, you don't want to hear it that way. You don't want to be degraded even more. See? What does this do? Brings doubt into a person's mind. Because the person's going to say, see, you want to draw close to God, and look what happened to you. Look at all these things happen to you. But the person will not focus on the good that they have. They'll focus on the negative. Very easy to focus on the negative. Yeah, so they'll focus on the negative, very good, and it'll make them feel worse. And then it'll make them have doubts, and that's what the evil inclination wants. Right? That a person now should say, okay, I do want to go on the right path. I do want to do the right thing. And what happens? What happens? You have hardship in things you never had hardship in before. If a person already struggled before, you say, okay, so it's part of the process. Very good. It's a part of the process. Okay. Yeah. It's part of it. It didn't turn over and all that just because I became religious. Just because I quote unquote saw the light. That's not the way it works. Is it a more meaningful life? Yes. Yeah, it's the most meaningful life? Yes. Whether you convert or not doesn't matter. True. The much more meaningful life. Okay. But the misconception is, and again, we spoke about this a lot, so I don't want to harp on it, right? But what's the misconception? I'm gonna keep God's law to the best of my ability, and everything's gonna be beautiful, right? Start strumming the guitar, we'll start singing Kumbaya, everyone will be happy, beautiful. And that's not the case. That is for sure not the case. I can't tell you. I can't tell you how many people I've heard, will say, I started these classes, right? And things got much worse. Much worse. If they're having financial problems, let's say, it got much worse. They have family problems, it got much worse. They get better. Right? So I said, why don't, you look at Abraham, gave him 10 tests, look at, so God's like, hey, what do you think of my covenant? Famine, he had to be thrown in a fiery furnace, it took his wife, he had to fight the five world powers. He had to, God saved his best for last, circumcision, sacrifice his son. The God promised him, it's going to be your progeny, and you're going to pass everything down spiritually too. I mean, like, what's going on here? Right? So again, life is all a test. That's the point. Right? I'm not going to dwell on this. Right? Life is a test. That's what it is. And you're put in this world. Someone asked me this on Thursday in my Q&A. Why did God test us? He tested us to help us reach potential. And there's a middle level a person has to reach. Now, guess what? Right? The $1 million thing is God didn't tell us what the minimum amount is. Right? The Ramchal speaks about it in Derech Hashem. He speaks about it in the way of God. Very good. But he doesn't tell you what the minimal level is. He just tells you got to get to a certain minimal level, whatever that is, in order to have a portion of the world to come. So is there any way we can rest on our laurels? No. So just got to keep plugging away. But the mistake people make is, I'm going to change my life, and everything's going to be beautiful, right? Every last thing's going to be beautiful. Now, meaningful will it be? Yes. Yeah, that there's no question. Meaning? Yes. Be able to answer a lot of different things? Why things happen? Yes. Does that mean life's going to be easy? Yeah, everything's going to be handed to us on a platter? No. But it will allow us to see divine providence, right? Even if a person, let's say, has difficulty, right? Or they suffer, so there's a way to look at it. There's a silver lining, right? Let's say. There's a bigger picture to see things. Even if something looks bad, right, doesn't mean it stays bad. Could turn out to be good. Some things that look good could turn out to be bad. We don't know. Right? We don't know. We think one thing, it turns out another way. We think another way, it turns out the opposite. Nobody knows. But again, you got to live in the moment. You got to put your best foot forward. But it's very easy to say that the cup is half empty and not half full. Now, what's the reason? What's the reason it's so simple for that? Very easy. Right? Very easy because we could complain about 1.5 million things. 1.5 million things. And they would all be legitimate to complain about. Yeah, but we complain too much. Yeah, there are things that bother us. Very good. A person lives in a place where it's cold weather. They don't like cold weather so much. They'd rather be sunny in, San Diego weather, 75 and sunny all year round. Very good. Some people love the cold. They don't like the warm. Okay. Yeah, people don't like to get up early. Some people do. I mean, there are a million things. A million things on a daily basis we could complain about. But there are 3 million and 5 million and 1 billion things we could look at as the day goes. It's good. Plenty of things to tap into, right? That is good and not be negative. Again, isn't it much easier to be negative than positive? Much easier. Definitely much easier, right? People complain all the time. Again, I'm not going to say everything they complain about doesn't matter. I'm not going to go that far. But seemingly that's as if to say, and again, I don't want to harp on this too much, even though there's a lot to say on this, as if to say nothing in their life is ever good. Now that's very hard to say. Right? That's very hard to say a person has no goodness at all. Or I can think of 1.5 million things, which I'm not going to, right? 1.5 million things, and a person can say, yes, this is good. This is good in my life. Yes, this is good in my life. Yes, this is good in my life. But how come you can't see the good? Very simple. The person gets beaten down in life. But that is exactly what the evil inclination wants. The evil inclination wants that a person gives up hope. Right? They give up hope. They just say, it's just too hard. It's just, I can't. There are people willing to fight through the struggle. And they know the struggle is not going to be easy. Okay. They know the struggle is not going to be easy. Right? But the complaint will be, or don't that be this hard? Yeah. So again, that's not part of the topic here. But what does the evil inclination want over here? The evil inclination wants you to throw in the towel. The evil inclination wants to cool you down. To, not only to cool you down, but to do things that are interesting, maybe fun, right? But they're going to have negative effects, right? They're going to have negative effects on a person, right? And that is going to be, right? And that effect will affect a person in a negative way, right? In a total negative way. Yeah, and they don't see it that way. Yeah, imagine, someone asked me they like to watch videos, animal videos. Okay. So what's the worst thing? What's the worst transgression? Wouldn't necessarily apply to a woman, but let's say to a guy, what would be the worst part of the transgression? That you waste the time when you could learn Torah. Let's say you're not going to learn Torah, okay. But over time, what does this do? You're going to say, for now, a few minutes here, a few minutes there, you got a few minutes. Okay, what's the big deal? How insular does that the person be? So this isn't so bad. So a person will justify, and they'll say, hey, so many people watching worse things. This isn't so bad. So in the bigger scheme of things, it's true. In the bigger scheme of things, 100% that's true, right? There's one problem. What if any of these things do? Any of these things makes a person want more of it. That's what they want. They want to want more of it, right? They're going to say, okay, I'll limit it to 5 minutes a day. Good luck. I'll limit it, to whatever I'm going to limit it to. Is the person going to stay to the limit? Again, we're talking one thing here. And we're talking about something, you'll tell me, isn't so severe. Right? There's no question, again, spoken about this a lot. Also, what does the person do in downtime? Yeah, a person on a robot can't learn all the time. Brain power can't take it. You need to veg. Right? You need to relax. Okay, so you're going to find a kosher way to do it. But what do any of these other things do? Any of these other things are going to take a person away. Why is it going to take a person away? Because little by little, these things are addictive. Video games can be addictive. Any of these other things can be addictive, right? A person can be addicted to the news. A person can be addicted to history. A person can be addicted to, I'm not saying that any of these things are necessarily bad. Yeah, the news is all Lashon Hara anyway, right? Well, most likely. It's all Lashon Hara, so you get a problem listening to Lashon Hara. Even if you just want to find out what's going on in the world. If you found a place, they're just telling you the news. They're not giving their, they're not giving their input. They're just telling you this happened, that happened, the other thing happened. Okay. Yeah, so again, does that have purpose? First, let's say I want to be educated. I want to know what's going on, in the world. So a friend of mine would always say, if there's a war, find out about it. Yeah. But again, what's the bigger problem here? Right? They tell me, the most serious infraction here is, certainly for a guy, he wasted time, he could have learned Torah. But first, I'm not going to learn Torah anyway. Okay. Well, what does it do, though? What does it do? It's something that in Hebrew we say is Moshe. What does it do? What does it do? It causes the person to want to do it more. Yeah, in other words, it's like money. Person has 100, they want 200. 200, they want 400. Never satisfied. Never satisfied. They'll say, I just want enough to cover my bills. Okay. And what if you have enough to cover your bills? Is the person going to say, okay, I'm happy now? I'm satisfied. I mean, they might be. They might be because, a lot of people in the red every month, very good. So, one day a person says, okay, great. Yeah, I got a chunk of money. Yeah, I took care of some debts, whatever. Very good. But then the cycle starts again. But is the person ever satisfied? They're ever satisfied with what they have? Right? The Mishna Perkei Avos says, we'll see later one day, I don't know when, maybe in about 97, we'll see. Right? What's the Mishna Perkei Avos say? Miwashir. Who's considered rich? Someone who's considered rich is Sameach B'Chelkoi. They're happy with what they have. Yeah, they're not lacking anything. Now, you look at them and you'll say, well, it seems like they're lacking a lot. You look at their house, you look at their clothes, you look at other things, right? But the person who's the happiest, isn't worried what he doesn't have. He's not worried what he doesn't have. Again, doesn't a person need basic essentials? Yes. Everyone needs basic essentials. But you know what? There's some things, if you don't have it, you don't have it. Yeah, let's say a person has more money, they buy more food. Yeah, yeah, probably stuff will kill you anyway. But let's say if you have less money that week, what's going to happen? You buy less. And what do? Now, some people go in debt to do it. Okay, wouldn't advocate it, but let's say, maybe for them that's a necessity, right? So therefore, putting themselves in debt a little bit, maybe not the end of the world because that's something they feel they need, right? But there are two different things there. There's something that they want, right? Maybe we'll harp on this a little bit, right? A person has wants, yeah, and then the person what they need. Wants and needs are two separate things. They're not necessarily. Some things could be the same. Most things are going to be different. Most things 100% going to be different. In other words, what a person wants is not what they need. Now, someone will say, but isn't that what they need? Now again, if it's something essential for the person, then that's a need. If it's something not, but they think they need it, now the question is, why do they think they need it? If they, I've been reading articles recently about the difficulty people have in, raising kids today, not just emotionally, but financially, and what their peers have, so to speak, and why the parents may feel the necessity because of peer pressure to give their kids certain things, even though they themselves will get it for themselves, even though it's well beyond what they probably should have. The friends have it. So how can you make them feel like they need it? So again, you got to be very strong. You got to be very strong in that sense. Now the question would be, what if really for that person it's not just a want? It's about self-esteem, right? I just heard something recently. Someone in the field more than 20 years, dealing with whatever teenage drug addiction in the religious community, and whatever and suicide rates, so whatever people committing suicide, whatever teenagers, and came up with basically in 20 years, this person's come down to one thing, right? There are a number of factors involved. You can have family issues, you have learning issues, many, many different things. A lot of these people, though, probably 90%, probably almost 100%, return to drug addiction and whatever is because of abuse, because of physical abuse, sexual abuse, right? But the underlying problem for a lot of people, for most people, is this lack of self-esteem. That is the single biggest killer today. Because a person has to feel they're useful. They have to feel they have good things to give to others. Right? Now, what happens if someone's got slammed their whole life and they have nothing to give to the world and this and that? Okay, I can't answer that. Yeah, that's a major trauma. But everybody has something, something. We spoke about this many times. I don't want to harp on this too much. But every person has something that they're good at. Now, obviously, how do I know that? Right? How do I know that to be true? Because God put everyone in the world for a reason. We may not always figure out what we're doing here, right? Necessarily. But God puts every soul into a body, into the right body. Right? He has to convince the soul to go in. But what does the soul not have a choice? Soul does not have, first of all, it doesn't have a choice what body it's going into. Okay. What else doesn't have a choice? I mean, it goes with the same thing. They don't have a choice who the parents are. They don't have a choice who the siblings are. They don't have a choice socioeconomic situation. Basically, they don't have a choice about nothing. Everything that's going to affect them, they had no choice. The only thing is God had to convince the soul to go in a body. Very good. But God put it in a certain body. Okay. Now, the soul is in the body. Very good. Now, that body, that child is going to grow up. It's going to have all kinds of different experiences. Again, with siblings, with school, with family, with parents, all kinds of things. Some will be good, some will be bad, some could be absolutely horrific, right? But no soul has ever gone in a body where God put it in the body just haphazardly, right? Or put the soul in the body for this soul to be in the world, and that person, till they die, had absolutely no purpose in the world. Now, we may not necessarily figure out our purpose. Okay. If we're a Christian, everyone, you believe in JC, suffered for all our sins. So, okay, I don't have to do anything. Okay. Right? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense anyway, because according to the Torah, it's all about what I do. Right? It's all about reward and punishment. Yeah. So you're here for a reason. Even if we don't figure out the reason, and we don't know what the reason is. Yeah, over a person's lifetime, how long they live, however long they live. Yeah, sometimes they live into their 80s, whatever. Yeah, or even older, or younger, doesn't matter. But before they leave this world, there are going to be good things about them and bad things about them. They're gonna, maybe they're gonna help people, in certain ways. Maybe, they'll do other things. Whatever it is, right? But most people, when they die, should be remembered for something good they've done. Again, I'm not saying that's the only reason they're in the world, but they should be remembered for good things they've done. That's right. That's the whole point of a eulogy. Is that when someone's going to eulogize someone, they're going to talk about positive things they've done in the world. Now, it could be there are negative things also, but they're going to speak about positive things. They're a good husband, a good father. I don't know, they helped others. They gave charity. They're going to be good things. There's a story. It was a story of someone who died, and rabbi speaks to, family members, to get just an idea of who the person was, so they could, give over eulogy. And for this person, nobody in the family, or friends, or anybody, this rabbi spoke to had anything good to say about them. Nothing. Right? Not one good thing. Right? So the general rule is that if a person's liked in this world for good, that means God's happy with them. If a person's not liked in this world, God's not happy with them. Right? Somebody, it doesn't matter how much money, power, anything else, or fame, right? Whatever they have. It's how they're viewed by the world. Right? Not in a superficial way. We're not talking about, rock stars, athletes, or, any of this, how they're perceived by others. Nobody cares. Right? Essentially, nobody cares. We shouldn't care either. Yeah. But in general, how is a person perceived by others? Yeah. This person, family-wise, again, they're not, people are not necessarily to bear a grudge, I wouldn't think, in general. But, family members, friends, had absolutely zero good things to say about about them. Not one good thing. Yeah. So like this rabbi said, what am I supposed to say? Yeah, you can't lie, right? You certainly can't lie and say, "Oh, this person did this, that, and the other thing," when they didn't, right? That's for sure bad. You're certainly not allowed to lie for that. There are certain things you are allowed to lie for. It's not the topic, but that's certainly not one of them. That's not one of them. So imagine someone has to give a eulogy of somebody that not one person in the world, or he didn't find the person, but he didn't find any person whatsoever connected to this person that had anything good to say. Nothing. Now that's kind of a hairy predicament to be in, right? Because on the one hand, if the person was really bad, you speak praises about them, that's a Torah prohibition, right? That's a Torah prohibition of, of sucking up to a person, let's say. That's called chanifa, right? That's forbidden. That's Torah prohibition. You can't lie, Torah prohibition, right? The bar sheker tircha, you can't lie, right? Certain case may be allowed, but this isn't one of them. So you're in the story with Chofetz Chaim, he had to write to a certain person, a secular Jew, needed help for something, and he kept trying to figure out, right, what's he going to call? How's he going to start the letter? Yeah, back in the day when people wrote letters. To the honorable, no, he can't say that. The person doesn't keep Torah mitzvahs. Yeah, Yeah, you can't call him wise, you can't call him this. He said, so, he thought about it for a while and he couldn't think of anything to say in a way that was going to be permissible, so he just scrapped it. He said, okay, I can't go to the person for help. Because he had no way to address the person. He had no way to address the person. It's a serious prohibition of lying when it's forbidden. Right? It's just one example. So this person, this rabbi in serious trouble here. What's he supposed to say? Yeah, he can talk in generalities, maybe not mention the person by name, but I think the person did. Maybe said something on the Torah portion of the week, tied it to death, or whatever, but didn't mention anything really about the person, so you stay out of the problem. You stay out of the problem that way. But the whole point of the, of the mourning period for the, let's say it was a parent, or anybody, have 7-day mourning period, right at the beginning. You have 7 days except on Shabbos or a festival where, people come in and give consolation. And the whole point of being in a mourner's house is to speak about character traits of the mourner. Yeah, now, if anyone's ever been to a mourner's house, let's say a secular Jewish home, or maybe others, whatever, it's almost like the last thing they talk about. Yeah, they'll talk about everything else under the sun. Anything doesn't matter, etc. But talking about the person themselves, yeah, a lot of times they don't even speak about the person. They won't speak about the person. Why not? Because it's too close to home, because they know they're also going to die, right? I saw last year, I had a relative passed away, so they had it on Zoom. So I was watching it with other people, and a lot of people there. This person died at the age of 95, and there were other people there also, close in age. Now, I couldn't help but think, what are they thinking? At this point, okay, probably 100%, what are they thinking about? The life of this person. Okay. What their connection was, maybe they went out with them many times, they got together many times, whatever it was, whatever the connection was. Anybody who was there had a connection, obviously, right? Some had, more of a connection, some maybe less of a connection, but a lot of people they related, right? Certainly, certainly family. There are other people there also, very good. I couldn't help think that all these older people that are secular, okay, they have family and a lot of them grandkids and great grandkids or whatever, but they know they're in line. They know, they're next in line. Whatever is going to happen, right? I heard someone say many times, many, many times, I have no friends left. They're all dead. They're not even 90 yet. They're in the mid-80s. Yeah, or actually, I shouldn't say mid-80s. They're whatever, closer to 90 than 80. Okay. Yeah, so you think about it, okay. Their family left, very good. But they're not friends. Someone passed away and said, oh, I know this person 65 years. I know this person, whatever. It's, relative by marriage. Okay. But all their friends are gone. So what's their motto? I'm here another day. Yeah, that's the motto. What they do with their life doesn't matter. But I'm here for another day. Right? I'm here for another day. I have no friends left. So what does that tell you? They know. Right now they're okay. They don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. Right? They have no idea. And that's scary. That is scary. No question. The older you get, the closer you are to the grave. I'm not saying anything new. Right? It's not my own chiddush. It's not my own novelty here. Everybody knows this. From the day a baby's born. Yeah, the day they're born, they age. They age. People don't think about it. But you age. Every second of every day, you're aging. Right? So every day, you're getting closer to the grave. When you get older, you start thinking about it more. When you're younger, you think, I got my whole life in front of me. Why should I worry about it? Yeah. Well, think about the meaning of life. For what purpose? Now, some people will think about it because certain things happen to them. Okay. But again, we're all waiting to die, basically. Yeah. It's just a matter of when, and how it's going to happen, which we have no choice. We have absolutely no choice. Right? But the body ages. Right? There is no way to stop that. Right? See what happens to Walt Disney, right? He's still frozen. I'm will probably die. He's probably dead anyway. Whatever, but everyone's gonna die. So as listening to people speak, about this relative of mine passed away, I couldn't help think like people there that were seemingly old. I'm gonna say 80s and up. Yeah, let's say number of people like that, even older. Yeah, I couldn't help think, what are they thinking? What in the world are they thinking? Now again, probably most of them are thinking about the person and bringing up memories of the person. Okay, that is probably the case. But I'm thinking, like, don't they know they're next in line? How many are going to live another 20 years? Probably very few. If they're in their 80s, live to 100? Not many people make it to 100. Yeah. And if they're in their 90s, they already know. Like someone told me, okay, they're turning 90 this year. So they said, 95 is a good time. I'd be happy if I died at 95. Okay. Yeah, but everybody knows their time is limited. Again, this isn't a novelty question of what you do with time. The Chofetz Chaim said people think time is money. Yeah, I say, says Chofetz Chaim, time is life. Yeah, the time's ticking. What am I doing? How am I using the time? What am I living for? Right? Age-old question. What am I living for? I just came across the verse in Isaiah, chapter 22, eat, drink, and bury, lest tomorrow I die. Now, what people are living for? Eat to live, live to eat. Some people, that's what they're living for. That's the most important thing to them. Okay. Yeah, but it's a rat race. Total rat race. So what happens, the cats, running around chasing its tail? What happens when it chases its tail? When it catches its tail? What does it do? Say, okay, next thing. I caught my tail, very good. Yeah, but you see, people get older, much older, and they see friends of them dropping like flies. Yeah, some more, some less. Okay. So they went to I don't know, 50th, 60th anniversary of their high school. Like, how many people are left? How many people are around? That are still here. Not that they couldn't get there, whatever. How many people are actually alive? Yeah, again, it's a scary proposition. It's a scary proposition because they know. They don't deal with it, but they know they're getting older. They see the writing on the wall. They're next. They're in line. So most people, in order to pass the time, and that's what they're doing essentially, if they're not learning Torah or involved in mitzvahs, they're passing time. But what is passing time going to do? Make you more depressed. Right? Why? They got to remember how much medication you have to take, and you're on this, and you're on that, and whatever. Yeah, so only in Florida now, there's like unbelievable flu going around. People getting sick left and right. Say here in Israel it's going to be bad flu season also. Whatever it is. But yeah, a person's much older. It could cause serious damage if you got the flu shot, right? If a person got the flu shot, it should be less. Okay, in theory. But again, if it's the person's time to go, flu shot ain't going to help you. Nothing else is going to help you. That's your time. But again, that's not even the point. The point is, the person hits a certain age where they're living for. So Rebbe says the age of 50. The age of 50 is when the Levites stop working. They stop working in the temple. Yeah. So he says by the age of 50, a person should already start thinking about the next one. By the age of 50. How many people start thinking about it, by then? Depends what's going on in their lives. Probably many people, they understand. Body slowing down, right? Can't do the same things they used to do when they were 20. Okay. Still may try. They still definitely may try, right? Reminds me of a story. I was waiting for someone many, many years ago. And two women walked by. Now, these two women were much older. I've told this story before, but it's always good to report. Not that I was looking. Two women passed by, and they were old. Or older, right? Let's say. I was young. I mean, much, much younger. Yeah, now how can I tell that they were old? Wrinkles on their face. Very simple. Very, very simple. Yeah, someone's got, bright, flaming red hair. Don't think it was their own. Can't imagine it was their natural hair, right? Let's say. And someone else, I don't know, I don't remember the hair, but there was one thing I did recognize. Yeah, one thing I recognized was that, And the other thing, at least one of them, I don't remember both, but definitely one of them was wearing a what do you call it? A black type miniskirt, leather miniskirt. I said, like, are you kidding? You're a shriveled up prune. That's what you are. 60s, 70s, whatever, wearing a black tight miniskirt. Seriously? At that age, you're telling me you're in the 20s, you're in the 30s, 40s, even, whatever. Someone that old, wrinkled and a shriveled up prune, as I would say, punked out here with a black leather, miniskirt to boot. So that's someone still trying to live. Not their age. Yeah, they're still trying to hold on to certain things. Okay. So it could be, let's say, if they don't have money to do Botox and skin operations and different things. Okay. Right. There are repercussions for that also, but okay. Yeah. So, a person does have to look younger. I could hear that. Definitely could hear that. But if not, gotta act your age. You gotta act your age. Yeah. So there are a lot of things out there that help a person that they can have everything. They don't have to have any problems. Take a little pill. You have a problem with indigestion, reflux, not a problem. Right? Take this little pill, eat whatever you want. Now they're not telling you to control your appetite. They're not telling you to control things that are not good for you. They'll say, no, so what do you care? What do you care is bad for you? We got a way out of it. What's the way out of it? You take a pill, take care of it. You want to eat that, spicy food, whatever it is. Yeah, okay. So don't feel bad. Don't feel like what it's going to do to your system. We got a solution. We got a beautiful solution. Now, doing that over time is probably not good. Probably not good for your stomach lining, but okay. Yeah, regardless of that. Yeah, but they're not giving you the right message. They're trying to convince you, eat what you want. Don't worry about it. We got a way out of it. We totally have a way out of it. Now, again, person's older. They understand, things can affect them, in a negative way. So what do? Either they guard themselves or they don't. And if they don't, but I have an out. I have an out over here. What's the out? The out is, this will tell me I can do what I want. I don't have to have any restraints at all. Yeah, and that's not what the Torah says. That's definitely not what the Torah says. The Torah says you got to guard your body. Very good. Yeah, you got to guard your body. So you got to take care of your needs. Okay. Well, taking care of your needs doesn't mean I can do what I want when I want. And I have a pill to take care of it. Now I got to say, well, what's the problem? If you did it once in a while, you're not going to have any bad reactions to it. So why are you going to harp it should be a problem? Okay. Maybe you'll get me on that. Maybe I would agree. You did it once in a blue moon. You wanted to eat it. You took this pill. Okay. No health ramifications. No health ramifications. But if someone abuses it, and they don't have self-discipline, what's going to happen? They'll pay the price. A doctor once told me a woman has a heart attack. An older woman. Yeah, it's a massive heart attack. Whatever, dealing with her, whatever, and what does she do? She puffs up on a cigarette. Doctor's gonna tell her, you just had a massive heart attack. Like most likely from cigarette smoke. Doesn't matter. I'm gonna enjoy it anyway, even if it kills me. Okay. Again, some things are hard to stop. Okay. But you would think I know somebody that, whatever, is a teenager or a young adult, from massive smoking, stop breathing. Literally stop breathing. That stopped them. Cold turkey. Cold turkey. Now, would that stopped everybody? I don't know. Would have scared them. Certainly would have scared them. Because something scares a person doesn't necessarily mean they're going to do anything about it, especially if it's addictive, right? But anyway, I'm getting way off topic here. the evil inclination, right? Back to the evil inclination here. The evil inclination, what does it want more than anything else? The evil inclination wants to cool you down and to convince you to do things that are not in your best interest, right? But again, it could be things that you'll say are not that bad, right? Watching animal videos. What's so bad about it? Watching part of a ball game. What's so bad about it? Yeah. Besides wasting time. Let's say, there's no immorality. Let's say, there's no cursing, there's no vulgarity. Yeah. Okay. I mean, it will be Lashon Hara, for sure. I need to be educated. I need to see what's going on in the news. So I get a problem with like believing half the stuff because, it doesn't matter who's giving over the news. Whether it's the leftists, whether it's the rightist, it doesn't matter. Right? The point is, person thinks it's face value, could be 100% Lashon Hara. Doesn't help. 100%, it doesn't help. So the question will be, someone will say, well, how can I be informed? How can I be informed properly? Yeah, so I guess there are Jewish outlets that have, they just report the information. If someone needs to go to get information, they could get it, right? In a permissible way. But again, what's the problem here? What is the fundamental problem? If you're gonna tell me the only problem is wasting time when a person could have learned for a woman doesn't apply, for the most part, okay. But I have to ask the question. This is how a person has to live their life. This is how essentially you have to live your life. Is this good for me? In my relationship to God or not? That is the fundamental question. That is the most important question. Yeah. Is this good for me or not? Now, don't we convince ourselves many times? We'll say this is good and why is nothing wrong and why I should be able to do it. We'll give all kinds of answers, except the right one. We get upstairs after 120 years, after the person dies, we have to answer. Person's going to have to answer for what they did. They can't say I never did it because God's going to play that video. First video is everything you did, right? Anyone's ever had out-of-body experience, they all say the same thing. What's the first thing that happens as their soul hovers over the body? Their life flashes before them. Every last thing a person's done flashes before them. Rapid fashion. Doesn't matter how long the person was alive. 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, all the thoughts, everything else. Boom, 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 boom. Very quick. Matter of seconds, it's over. But they see their life flash before their eyes. So you can't say you didn't do it. Right? Just like we're recording here, everybody, everyone's being recorded, everything they do. Two angels follow them everywhere. Everywhere. Yeah, recording. Does God need them to record? No. In the heavenly court, God can say, okay, I know what this person's done. This is going to be the judgment. Well, what does God do? Just like a court down here, as long as it's not corrupt. Can't say that about all courts, but let's say it's not corrupt. Yeah, before a judge makes a decision, right? Forget about a jury. Let's say the judge is the one making the decision. Before the judge makes the decision, what's he going to do before he makes a decision? Before he makes a decision, the judge is going to hear all the evidence. He's going to bring in all the witnesses and hear all the evidence, and then he's going to make a decision. So just like a court in this world, that's the way it works. That's the way it works in the heavenly court. Yeah? All these angels are going to come testify, right? And they're going to say, okay, did this on this day, that on that day. All the evidence being brought before the heavenly court. Now, $1 million question. Why does God need to do that? God knows past, present, future. He knows what people have done. He doesn't need to do that. Yeah? But to show fairness, he's not going to judge anything until, right? The heavenly court won't judge until what? Until they hear all the evidence. So two angels that follow a person for whatever they've done will bring the good, the bad, and the ugly. Whatever the person's done. And then it's going to come in front of the heavenly court. And again, it's going to depend why the person did it, how the person did it, etc. Right? Because we're judged according to what we've done. When a person's done something, How does it looked at? It's looked at why they did it now. Yeah, right now, their intention. Forget about what future ramifications are, or who they're going to be or not be. And not based on the past, they're judged right now according to who they are and where they're holding right now, not on future potential. Now, if that's the case, okay. So if a person's holding, a lot better now than they were before, then the judgment could be harsher, even on something minor. If someone was a potato farmer in Idaho, no offense, anyone's a potato farmer grew up in Idaho, yeah, they grew up not knowing anything about nothing, and they do certain things. Ignorance isn't bliss 100%. But for a lot of things, they're going to get judged for doing things like they did it by accident. Okay. Yeah, it looks like by accidents. Well, certain things they don't get a free pass. Well, that's different because they don't know what they're doing. They don't have a clue what they're doing. For some things, not for everything. But if someone now, and this is what we saw before, someone's holding somewhere in the world, yeah, they're coming to this, they want to have this connection to God, and now they've seen the light, so to speak. So now they've seen the light, what happens? It's a whole different ball game now. God is looking at them in a totally different way, even if they're a work in progress. Even if they're a work in progress, okay, but they know better. There are certain things God is going to say, but okay. Another thing I can't judge you on too badly because you didn't know. Okay, right? But now there are certain things you've done, you know better. Now the question is, why'd you do it? Did you do it because of peer pressure? Did you do it because it was not in your control, right? Onus, as it's called. It's not in your control. Did you do it because evil inclination convinced you, but you knew it was wrong? Yeah, these are very different levels here, right? We say onus Rahmana Patre. Onus, the Torah says you're exempt. So if you're under onus in general, it's beyond your control. You're not liable, right? You would never be liable for such a thing. Okay. But if a person knows better, and let's say that's not the case, and a person seriously knew better, then you're in trouble, right? Then you're in trouble. Why? Because now you have greater responsibility. What comes with greater responsibility? What I've done. Yeah, so before, if you were a potato farmer in Idaho, God's going to look at it one way. If a person knew better, God's going to look at it a different way. So a friend of mine would say, better to be ignorant, God's not going to judge you so severely. Okay. On the other hand, if you had greater potential, yeah, and you relied on that, you're in trouble either way. Right? Damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Right? So you say, well, better I be ignorant. Ignorance isn't bliss over here. If a person doesn't have greater potential, okay. So they reach whatever potential they were given, they got to. Okay. But if God sees that they had greater potential and they were just lazy, right? We speak about this all the time. Yeah, if they were just lazy and, they didn't want to reach it, they just want to relax and, stay on their level, whatever it is, they're going to get judged much more severely. Why? Because they shut their mind to everything else. They don't want to work. They're happy where they are. Right? As we always say, go in a job interview that way. Job qualifications. Well, I'm really mediocre in a lot of these things. Right? What's the head of HR? If they're doing the interview, what are they gonna ask? What are they gonna ask? Like, what do you bring? What do you bring to the table? How are you gonna help our company grow? How are you gonna help our company in general? A person says, well, it's a good question because whatever, I just need a job, but I'm really, I don't have outstanding qualities. I have a degree, very good, right? So we have a bachelor's degree, okay, it's worth something, very good. Yeah, past work experience, yeah, okay. But nothing stands out. Nothing stands out over here. Essentially, they're saying, there's a quote from Happy Days, yeah. Back in the day, person's humdrum. They're humdrum. Meaning, they're striving for mediocrity. God wants someone to strive for mediocrity. A boss, an employer, does not want someone to strive for mediocrity. Yeah. Yeah, unless they just need a body to do certain things or whatever, and it's it's menial work. So you can take almost anybody. Okay. Again, if someone, wants to like go up the ladder and they have credentials, good. But if they're going in just saying I'm mediocre at all these things that they're looking for, next, you didn't bring anything to the table. You brought zero to the table. Now, that's in physical terms. That's easy to understand, right? To a certain extent, unless you have connections where it's not going to matter, right? It's not going to matter what your work ethic is, and if you're good at anything or whatever, they'll hire you anyway because you have connections. Okay, yeah, we're not talking about that, but let's talk about it in spiritual terms, right? In spiritual terms, a person, the soul is insatiable. If the soul is insatiable, the more you learn, the more you want to learn. Yeah. The more you want to do the right thing. Okay, what takes a person away from doing the right thing? Says the Gemara. The Gemara says, "Sheniknas bo ruach shtus." A stupid thought got in a person's head. That's what it means. Yeah. What does it mean, a stupid thought? It means a person, is willing to forego spiritual, advancement, so to speak, and strengthening the soul, just like good Uncle Asa for both lentils. Now, make this a little more graphic. Yeah, Esav and Yaakov, you couldn't tell the difference between them until after Bar Mitzvah. Yeah, obviously, Yitzhak knew the difference, but, he was harnessing Esav's qualities, and then after Bar Mitzvah, he sort of went haywire. Okay, but Esav and Yaakov grew up in the house of Yitzhak and Rivka. Very good. They saw Avram and Sarah. And the rest of the generation, probably nothing great shakes to write home about, but they were in the house of righteous people. Tremendously righteous people, we can't imagine who they are. Now, if you look at, what can a person say? A person can say, but Esav grew up in such a house, how could he go sour? How in the world could he go sour? How could he give up his portion of the world to come for a bowl of lentils? Now you're going to say he was starving, he thought he was close to death, and he didn't care about his birthright, so Yaakov stole it, quote unquote. He got him to swear to give it to him, he gave it to him. But if he didn't care about his birthright, in general, then why does he ask his father for a blessing? What, Dad, you don't have a blessing for me? He's crying. Esav is crying. You don't have a blessing for me? How do you not have a blessing for me? He understood what a blessing was. He understood, he saw angels. Angels came into their house. He saw angels. So what happened? What happened? Not only that, the Chidah, one of the great commentators more than 500 years ago, the Chidah says that Esav was 1,000 times greater in brain power than Yaakov. Now, I can say that's a guzma, that's, a little bit of an exaggeration, but he had unbelievable brain power, unbelievable spiritual capacity here. So what happened? What happened, right? So Rashi, others say, he came in from the fields, it's rummaging, pillaging, doing all kinds of terrible things. And he says, give me some of that red stuff. And Abraham had died, so lentils around, right? To remind you of the life cycle, yeah? Something that's circular, very good. So he says, give me some of the red stuff. So so Yaakov finds him very vulnerable. He says, sell me a birthright. What is my birthright worth? I'm going to die. Yeah? And he thinks he's going to die. That doesn't mean he didn't understand what spirituality was. 100% he understood. He would have asked for a blessing if he didn't. Yeah? But what's the obvious question? Right? What's the obvious question? What happened here? How is he willing to give up spirituality for boiled lentils? What's the answer? Because his evil inclination destroyed him. His mind might have known the right thing to do, give him credit for that, but his body took him somewhere else. His heart took him somewhere else. So the question that someone's going to say, well, if it happened to Esav, and look how he failed, we have no chance. We don't have a snowball's chance in hell for succeeding. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is that what happened over here? Esav knew about spirituality. He understood spirituality. He didn't make fun of it, seemingly. He'd say, oh, Yaakov, you like to learn all day, this and that. I like to do other things. I also like to learn, but maybe not, you don't necessarily see. I mean, I'm not an expert in all the midrashim and whatever, but he doesn't scoff at him. He doesn't make fun of it. After Yaakov sells in the birthright, Esau sells in the birthright. Yeah, Yaakov feeds him, takes care of his physical needs. Yeah, at the end of that, what does it say? It says he despised his birthright. Okay. Yeah, because the underhanded way Yaakov took it. Okay. But up until that point, did he scorn spirituality in general? Up to a certain point, no. Now, he might get carried away in other things. He liked to hunt, very good. Right? He liked to trap people, he liked to lie, do other things. Okay. That doesn't mean he wasn't in tune spiritually. That's not what it means. What it means is his evil inclination was so strong that overcame him. It overcame him. Yeah, to the extent where he understood what he did. He blames Yaakov for that. Okay, but he understood what he did. Now, if he had no connection to spirituality whatsoever, then what's he crying about the second time? The second time, Yitzhak says, who came and got the blessing? He says, oh, it's my brother. He already swindled me once. Then Yitzhak understood that he was the one to get the blessing. Okay. But even when he flees, when Yaakov flees, and Rivka tells him to go to her brother, go to Lavan and all that, Yitzhak blesses him. And said, God should take care of you, this and that. He doesn't, so I don't question that. Why doesn't he chastise him? Why doesn't he yell at him? And say, what you did to your brother? How could you have thought that was okay? Right? Again, deeper question you could ask is why did he give him the blessing in the first place? Why do you want to give Yitzhak the blessing in the first place? And Rivka knew better, right? She had prophecy, very good. Yeah. That's the whole question we're not going to deal with. But you could ask the question, why did he chastise him? He knew what he did. It was very clear what he did. Yeah, but Yitzhak understood the right person got the blessing and that he made a mistake. Yeah, he understood that. So there's no point to chastise him. Because the way he did it doesn't matter. But the fact is he got it. Right? And he understood he gave it to the right person. Okay. But even without that, Esav could have had half the tribes. They would have split half the tribes between Esav and Yaakov. Why didn't that happen? Because he went off the rails. He wasn't worthy. Yeah, so all the tribes went to Yaakov. Very good. We could have had half. Let's go on Thursday. Could have had half. Okay. But he went off the rails. So what's the lesson? What's the lesson over here? The lesson is, no matter how great a person is, the evil inclination does not let go. The greater the person, the greater the evil inclination. Okay. So then this brings us back to what we said before. That what does the evil inclination do? The evil inclination can make a person be miyayish, to give up hope. Yeah, they'll say, I did terrible things. God's never going to accept it. I'm too far gone, etc. And that's what it does. It'll try and convince you beyond the shadow of a doubt. There's no hope. You have no hope. So you apply it over, you say, listen, if Esav, as great as he was, and could have been greater than Yaakov in many ways, if he failed with his parents and grandparents, then there ain't no chance in hell we're going to survive. There's no possible way. How can God expect us to survive against this crazy world we live in? Against all the leftists and, trying to convince us we're in the wrong bodies and who knows what. Yeah, with everything that society has to offer, which is bad. How in the world can God expect anyone to stay religious such terms? And they see all kinds of horrible things. Yeah, in society, even amongst Jews. Could be even amongst the Orthodox Jews. We're not immune. We're not immune. There's a whole case recently. 20-year-old kid goes to a party before Shabbos. Yeah, whatever. People discussing this now, or whatever, a few months ago. Yeah, and what happened? 20-year-old kids. So what do you do with these parties before Shabbos? Yeah, have some cholent, maybe have some kugel, whatever, getting ready, preparing for Shabbos, and there's booze. So what about alcohol? Yeah, so what happened? What happened? You know, they gave this kid enough to drink, whatever. And why did he kill somebody? Killed a young woman and child. Yeah, he's going to jail for 6 years. 6 years going to jail. The question is, so anyway, the whole question: are they allowed to do it? You have these things in religious, in religious communities, and liquor is flowing, like water. And no one says anything, and they're abetting it, and who's guilty over here? Whatever. There's a whole lot of questions here. Not really the point, right? There are a whole lot of questions. Society is tempting. There's a lot of temptation. You see it from the beginning of time. Yeah, the tree that Adam and Eve ate from, right? The tree of knowledge, whatever it was. No one says it was an apple, but whatever, it was a grape, it was wheat, it was a fig, whatever it was. You think that tree looked like a shriveled up tree? Right? All the trees were beautiful in the Garden of Eden, very good. Yeah, but it had like the most unbelievable fruit on it. But God gave one command: whatever you do, don't eat from the tree of knowledge. Okay, they failed. We'll have to speak about that, but that's not the point either. You think it wasn't tempting? From the beginning of time, there's been temptation. How could God expect man not to give in to temptation? Now it's worse. It's 10 times worse. Why? Because Adam ate from the tree. He made a calculation. He said, if I eat from the tree, I put evil inside of myself. Every time I do the right thing exponentially, my soul grows. If I do the wrong thing exponentially, it goes down. Yeah, but I have tremendous potential for growth. Much quicker than the way the world was set up. That was his conclusion. That was his intention. Comes on the Gemara and says, God calls him an apikoros. God calls him a heretic. Why does God call him a heretic? His greatest creation. Its greatest creation. How can it be a heretic? Because God agreed. What he said was true. He didn't deny that. Right? In other words, if evil's inside of you, you overcome it. Exponentially, you elevate the soul. You do the wrong thing, it does the opposite. Okay. God says 100% I'm in. I agree. There's only one problem. Only one slight problem. God says, I didn't tell you to do that. I didn't want you to eat from it. Yeah? God gave him free choice. God knew this could happen, and what happened in the end? God doesn't want the Garden of Eden. He doesn't want them to eat from the tree of life, because if they eat from the tree of life, they're going to live forever. Part of the process of getting atonement, you have to die. Not full atonement, right? But a person has to die. Yeah, God didn't want to have to go through this whole process, but he had no choice, right? He understood what was going to happen. Yeah, but again, what do you think? What do you think? Adam and Eve come to this tree, or Eve comes to this tree, whatever the snake said, doesn't matter. Yeah, it comes to this tree, beautiful fruits. Most beautiful things you've ever seen. Yeah, what happens? What happens? She gets convinced to eat from it. Okay. If there would have been a shriveled up tree, yeah, if it didn't look nice and enticing, she ain't gonna eat from it. In no possible way, she's gonna eat from it. Yeah. So if that's the case, you say you can't blame her. How can you blame her? Right? That was the test. Everything in life is a test. Yeah. And it's not like, certain things are not tempting. There are plenty of things that are tempting. Yeah. If a person grew up as a sports fan, let's say, you don't think it's tempting? It's tempting. Yeah. Especially if your team's winning a lot. It's tempting. Okay, I'll look at the box score. Okay. I'll watch some of the highlights. Okay, I'll do, whatever. It's tempting. Yeah. So you think what's so bad about it? Nothing, technically. Yeah, but what's so bad about it? It's a waste of time. And it's addictive. And it takes you away from serving God properly. Can learn other bad things, let's say. Let's say. Yeah. So there's a lot of temptation in the world. So the question comes up, somebody asked, so why did God create evil? Very good. Right? Isaiah chapter 45, verse 7. Right? According to our translation, and according to other messed up translations, God 100%, the Hebrew says he created evil. That's a problem for Christians, so it must be God didn't create evil, right? Fallen angel, you got the Satan, Mr. S, whatever you want to call him. Yeah. He's the one causing all the evil. Or if you're Zoroastrian, right? One of them in India, let's say, 300,000 of them. There's a good God and a bad God. Very good. Good God does good things, bad God does bad things. Okay. Right? That'll answer a question. Well, how bad things happen. So you get a bad God. Very good. I don't believe in that. So God is all good. How do these things happen? Why did God create evil? Does that mean God is evil? No. Why did he create evil? Ramchal says very clearly, Derech Hashem, right? In the way of God, he says very clear. He created evil to tempt man, to give man free choice. They want to tap into it, they can't. They don't want to tap into it, they stay away from it, very good. Yeah, but it's tempting. The whole world is one big world of temptation. One big world of temptation. So if it's one big world of temptation, how in the world is the person supposed to stay tahor and naki? How are they supposed to stay pure and clean in this messed up world? Well, right, the Gemara says God created the evil inclination. What comes with the evil inclination? Right? He created antidotes. What's the antidote? What's the antidote? Torah. Very good. That is the antidote. Well, the Gemara says the antidote doesn't help if you don't have heavenly help. You need heavenly help as well. If you don't have heavenly help, then the antidote can't help you. That's how powerful it is. So you can say, but it's not fair. Look what Adam did. Look at the repercussions for all generations. Okay. So you say sometimes it's easy and sometimes not. Very good. But even if there's temptation, I have to ask myself the following question. If what I'm doing right now, and we can get fooled, for sure, and that is what I'm doing now good for me, good for my soul, or not good for my soul? That's the question, right? That is the question, right? Now, if I have a doubt, then I stay away from it until I get clarity. Right? But we can answer all kinds of answers and say, yeah, it is good for me. It does make me a better person. It could be true, it could not be true. Right? It could be a total lie, a total fabrication. And the reason being is because you want to be convinced that it's the right thing. That is the right thing. All right, let me deal with some questions here. Was it really his to give away? Jacob's to be so only that he could give it away. So for whatever reason, God gave Yitzhak the ability to give this spiritual thing away. Yitzhak had that ability, right? To give it to one of his sons, right? And he was whoever that son was going to be, he was going to be the progenitor and get all these blessings to pass it down to future generations. Yeah, the spirituality. That was going to be passed down. So you see, Yitzhak was given the ability to give that. Now, the question is, there are many questions here. One is, without really going into too much, one question is, why did Yaakov take it in that way? Why didn't he just go, if his mother told him, your father is going to give the blessing to your brother, and they were fighting in the womb who's going to get the blessing, who's going to come out first, who's going to be considered the firstborn, i.e. the Bechor, as it's known. So why did he go to Yitzchak? Why did he go to his father and explain, listen, Esau's not who you think he is. Even though he came to his father asking, how do you take tithes on salt? Right? It's kind of a foolish question in a certain way. Right? But convincing his father, he's still on the right track. He's still going in the right path. Okay. You don't think his father saw through that? He had prophecy. He wasn't a dummy by any stretch, right? So it's not the question. What you could ask. It's not the way Yaakov took the blessing. The reality is, why would Yitzhak consider giving it to him? The Esav, not the Yaakov. But you see, God said he had the right to do it. He had the right to give. That wasn't even a question. That wasn't a question. It was his to give. Now the question is, there are two questions. We're not necessarily going to deal with because it's not really the point, right? There are two questions here. Why did Yitzhak think it was okay to give it to Esau? And why did Yaakov take it that way? Why could he, why could he have gone to his father? Now, if he went to his father, maybe his father would have listened. Maybe his father said, I know better, I prophesy. Yeah. God told me I have to give it to Esau. Let's say. He had reasons for giving it to him. Yaakov didn't need it. Yaakov was already sitting there learning it wasn't going to affect him. It was totally not going to affect him. Blessing would have had a spiritual effect on Esau. That's one reason. One of the things he thought, right? But if you look at it on Yaakov's side, why didn't he take it in a different way? Right? Because the bottom line is, if an evil person has something of holiness, you take it away as much as however you can do it. Let's say an evil person has a Torah scroll. Now, they're going to abuse this Torah scroll. So really, technically, since they're going to abuse it in many ways, wouldn't be a mitzvah, if it's, let's say it's written according to Jewish law, it's written the right way. So why would it not be a mitzvah to break in the person's house or synagogue or whatever and take it out and steal it? You say, but it's the law of the land, you get caught or whatever. Okay. Let's say you wouldn't get caught. Wouldn't you do whatever you can to get it out of their possession in order it's not going to be abused? I'll give an example. Yeah. The beginning of the states of Israel, they demanded in certain cases, not all cases, I don't think, that a person died, did an autopsy. Now, autopsy is desecration of the body. Doesn't matter how the person died. Yeah, that's called defiling the body. Right? So therefore, when a person dies, certainly here in Israel, certainly in Jerusalem, 24 hours, you bury the body. No matter what. You bury the body in 24 hours, that's custom in Jerusalem. Other places could be, you wait for people, whatever, but anyway, that's the custom. But everybody holds that's desecration of the body. That's showing unholiness to the body. Doesn't matter how the person died. Right? For our purposes, you bury them. That's it. They died. Okay? Doesn't matter what you think caused it or you want to check other things. Forget it. You're not allowed to. So there were many times people risked their lives when they knew this was going to happen, broke into the morgue or whatever, wherever the body was. They stole it and buried the body. Literally, they went in and stole it. You say, but that's breaking the law according to, secular law in the land of Israel. Okay. Yeah, but you do whatever you can not to defile a body. Yeah, there were all kinds of protests here about, a number of years ago, digging up certain roads, there were bones there. Yeah, so there are a lot of groups that protested. You can't dig up bones. Right? You make the road go somewhere else. Right? Or you got to take these bones and bury them somewhere else. You can't just plow over, a place where there are bones, Jewish bones, make a road. That's defilements of the bones. Yeah, a lot of people protested. There are a lot of protests, about it because it's sanctity of the body. Sanctity of a burial place. Can't just do whatever you want, so to speak. We don't live in a hefka world, in a world of, that's ownerless. Certainly not. Certainly not. But, back in the day, that's what they did. They stole bodies. There were people who went in and stole bodies in order to bury them. It sounds kind of morbid and everything else, but you're saving the body from desecration. There's a big mitzvah to do that no matter what. Yeah, you don't want them to abuse it. So the same thing. Same thing, an evil person has something of holiness. You do whatever you can, get it out of their hand. Even if it's an underhanded way. That wouldn't matter. Why? Because you don't want them to abuse it. If you have the ability to do it. Yeah, now the question is how far that goes. That's not part of the discussion here. Right? Let's say you couldn't do it. Could you hire people to do it? Or what happened if they got caught? Or whatever. Right? Okay. These are much bigger questions. But I would say I would say they're important questions. Yeah, because it's not about live and live and this and that. There's certain things you cannot have happen, right? You cannot have happen, right? There's a question. A scribe, a blessed memory, someone I knew many many years ago. Um, they had a question that a conservative synagogue gives them a Torah scroll to fix. Yeah, is he allowed to fix it? Yeah, that's the whole question. Right? What's the reason? What's the reason? Let's say he does fix it. Okay. How many things do in Reform and Conservative synagogue they do wrong? They do wrong, when it comes to prayer, that plenty of other things as well. But when it comes to prayer in general, these Torah scrolls are gonna get abused. Totally get abused. Yeah. So if that's the case, how can you fix it? How can you fix it? It's a big problem. Now, if you say the more traditional this and that, maybe it's less of a problem. It's an issue. It's not a, it's not a small, it's not a small thing over here, right? Because again, they're not going to use it the right way. They're certainly not, right? And I think that's pretty obvious. I don't have to go into detail. Imagine, they they call up a gay couple. Yeah, that's a problem. And if the person who's reading is not gay, whatever. Yeah, that's definitely a problem. We call up a woman, that's a problem. I mean, there are a lot of problems. There are a lot of problems. A lot of problems. Yeah. So Yaakov did it in a way. Well, one of the ways actually he fooled his father, but to show that one possible answer is he fooled his father in order that it shows that Yitzhak could have been tricked. That's another thing. That's another possibility. Yeah. Or he could say, he did whatever he could. He listened to his mother, right? And he did whatever he could in order to make sure he didn't get the blessing, right? In an underhanded man. You do whatever you can, right? Someone like Esav has a Torah scroll in his house. Yeah, he's going to abuse it. You don't try and steal it? Why not? Again, laws of the land, okay, how's it work? Good question. But he's going to abuse it. Yeah. What happens? Someone asked, one second, let me just see the other questions here. Okay. What happens? What happens? Someone lies to themselves, meaning they come to a conclusion based on a lie and they act upon it. Yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, knowing that's a sin, but unknowingly, well, if they know it's a sin, it's not unwilling participation. They know, right? Or let's say like this: they think it's not a problem to do. They convince themselves it's not a problem to do. Yeah. But deep down, they're wrong. Right? 100% wrong. So let's not say it's a difference of opinion. They want to be lenient, other people want to be stringent. No. This 100% outright is forbidden. They are coming to the conclusion that it's okay to do. But they're wrong. They convince themselves they have a whole agenda. They have a whole agenda why it's permissible. Yeah? So they convince themselves based on the agenda. That makes it right? Doesn't make it right. That if they know it's a sin, that's a problem. Yeah. If they know it's a sin, how do you get out of that problem? You can't get out of that problem. Yeah. If they're lacking information, let's say like this, they're lacking information. If they're lacking information and they make the wrong decision, okay, the repercussions are different. If they were told by a rabbinic authority to do something, and that rabbinic authority was wrong, rabbinic authority gets the problem. Yeah, he gets the problem. But if in this case, they convince themselves, very good. If they convince themselves and they're wrong, they're liable. No matter why they convince themselves they're wrong. They're wrong in general. If they knew it's wrong, right? If they knew it's wrong, but they lied to themselves. What's the reason they lied to themselves? They convinced by other people, They listen to people they shouldn't have. You know, I'll give an example. Let's say someone's becoming religious. And parents aren't religious. So parents want them to pray in their synagogue, right? Let's say it's Reform or Conservative synagogue. To boot on the high holy days. Not just on the Shabbos, not just on any other festival, on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. It's very important that their child be there. Now, there are things that are going to be cut out from the service in general. If you want to say most of it's rabbinical, it doesn't matter. Yeah, certain things can't be done there. Torah violations, even if they're rabbinic violations. Many problems. In this case, how does the parents, what they want, override it? Doesn't. Shouldn't. Now, if this quote-unquote rabbinic authority says, no, you can be there with your parents. And they listened. Let's say this person listened to them. That rabbi was wrong. Dead wrong. This person didn't know any better. Listen. So you can say they're both at fault. Right? How can they be both at fault? Maybe you say, listen, he listened to this rabbinic figure and he was wrong. Right? So maybe he gets less of the burden, less of the problem. That rabbinic authority will get the majority of the sin. Yeah? Can they make mistakes? Sure, people can make mistakes. People make egregious mistakes, tell you certain things that are prohibited, are not forbidden. When they are, yes. Because they mislead people, that's even worse. Amakti as the rabbim, someone causes other people to sin, that's worse than the sin itself. Right? The Reform rabbi doesn't know anything. Yeah, but he's convincing other people, not to believe in God, not to keep Torah, not to keep mitzvahs, at whatever level. He even doesn't know anything. He's causing other people to go astray. You gotta say, but the person has the right to think for themselves, very good. That person's very convincing, very mesmerizing, whatever. He must know what he's talking about until the person comes to the right conclusion. Yeah? The person sinned, okay. So the sin is less for them. It's more than the person that is misleading them. But keep in mind, the one who misleads, the sin is egregious, absolutely egregious. It's worse than the sin itself. Keep that in mind. Worse than the sin itself. Even if they don't know anything, it doesn't matter. The fact is, they're causing people to do the wrong thing. That's a problem. That's a major problem. Yeah. So if they lie to themselves, it's still liable. Right? We'll make the easy case. They lied to themselves. Okay. Yeah, they lied to themselves. Are they guilty? They're guilty. Yeah. What if it's an onus? What if someone taught them they thought was an authority and wasn't? Some things may be an onus, some things not. Right? It depends on the case. But if they convince themselves and they won't hear anything else, and they convince themselves, they're liable. They should be liable unless there are other external factors of why they did it. Right? If there are no other external factors, they are 100% guilty. Right? Because they knew better. They should have known better. They convinced themselves to lie. They were convinced of the lie. Who said you be convinced of the lie? God gave everyone a brain to think. Most people don't use their brains, but, you're going to say the media is very persuasive. Good. Yeah. So what do? God gave you a brain to make a decision. Good decision. Or God forbid a bad decision. I mean, listen, you got plenty of people doing idolatry, and idolatry doesn't make sense in so many ways. Yeah. They're all liable for death penalty. Most of the known world will be liable for death penalty. Yeah. Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, they're all liable for death penalty. Muslims not, they believe in one God. They're still liable for other things because of false religion. But most of the known world is going to be liable for death penalty. You say, it's not my fault. Why is it not your fault? God told you to bow down to show a fat guy? God told you to bow down to a cow? Cow's not the smartest animals in the world. Yeah? So, you got convinced of it. You lived in, communist Russia, became, you were atheist. Okay. Yeah, you gotta say it's not my fault. Yeah, that's where you grew up. Okay. That's where you grew up. Very good. God gave you a brain, come out of it. Some people come out of it. You say a lot of people don't. Okay. But things that are universal, people can come out of. They have to know. God gave them a brain if they don't use it. Right? The Or Chaim Kadosh says, blessed memory, one of the great commentators, more than 100 years ago on the Torah. And he says every single person, Jew or non-Jew, has in their soul the ability to come to the truth, the ability to search for God. Everybody. Now, that's the reason you see there are 80,000 different religions in the world. Okay, people search in the wrong direction, and a lot of it's idolatry and all that. Okay, but why would you have so many people in the world searching for supernatural in some ways? Mostly the wrong way, but where do they get that from? Because you have to have meaning. A person wants to search for meaning. They want to search for something that's beyond them. Very good. Logically speaking, I thought there are a lot more atheists in the world than there are, right? Even though, let's say, according to statistics, about 400 million. But the vast majority of idolaters in the world, between or in false religions, besides Christianity, Buddhists, Hindus, and and Islam, that makes up most of the known world almost. Right? About 3 billion people, 3.5 billion people. I mean, most of them got wiped off the face of the map. Yeah, God gave people free choice. Okay. So you're born in a certain society. That means you have to be like the society around you. I gotta be convinced I'm not in the right body. If I go into an airport or somewhere, I have to figure out which bathroom I should go in, depending on how I feel. That's insanity. Then people call it education. People are open-minded. It's insanity. Tell a sports enthusiast for years that a biological man should be competing with women. That's insanity. That is absolute insanity. You need the president, whatever you think of him, has to write into law. There are only two genders, male and female. Say whatever you want about him. That's it. That's also insanity. Yeah, I need a president of the United States to write that into law. Seriously? That's how far society's gone. That's so somebody asked, when I agree, get to the last question here. When I agree, people in today's world face more challenges than Adam and Eve. And I don't even have challenges. No one didn't have challenges. Yeah. Today's a different world. Today's a whole different ball of wax. So I would say, yeah. The challenges people face today, a pale in comparison, are quite, let's say better, quite a bit more what Adam and Eve had to choose from. I don't think there's any question. And the fact that anyone today stays religious in any way, shape, or form based on what's out there and based on the difficulty that they go through in general, anyone to stay religious in that sense with all the pressure from society, all the pressure from family, all the pressure from, making a living and sickness and all kinds of things. Yes, 100%. 100%. Anyone stays religious today, it's miraculous. It's miraculous. You got to be like the Rock of Gibraltar. No matter what happens to a person, right? God runs the world and God's in charge. Yeah, that's what we have to keep saying a million times a day, and to be thankful for everything you have. Every last thing. No matter how difficult that might be. Every last thing. Thank you for this challenge. I don't know how many people are going to say that. Yeah. Thank you for this challenge. Thank you for the ability for having me try to overcome this. Thank you for, but again, positive things. Thank you for the air we breathe. Thank you for this, cup of tea I just drank. Thank you for, even terrible things we eat that we enjoy. Yeah. Cookies and candy and cake, be thankful for so many things. Be thankful for your life. You can go like this. You don't have arthritis. 1.5 million things. Yeah. But again, what do we always say? Life beats a person down. So it's very hard to be thankful when you're getting tossed around. Getting tossed around like a rag doll. But we're living in very, very difficult times. Extremely difficult times. What's the single biggest test today? The single biggest test today is the fact that we have to work on our faith and belief in God. That is the biggest test. Because we see so many things don't add up. that don't make sense. People suffer. People suffer from livelihood, people suffer from illness, people suffer from any number of things. This is why the Ramchal in Path of the Just, at the very beginning, says because of all this hardship and all the difficulties everybody goes through, and no one's immune. Everybody goes through them. Whatever the hardship is, says the Ramchal over there, that there must be something else going on. Because there's so much hardship, how could it be this world is the ultimate? That's what in a nutshell, that's what he says. In other words, there has to be a spiritual world. There has to be something else, i.e. the soul. Right? And the soul world and all that. Why? Because there's so much hatred, there's so much violence, so much disagreement. And man brought it to the world, okay. It's all what God wanted, very good. But he gave us the opportunity to make good decisions, bad decisions. Okay. So even if that is the case, you look at the world, says the Ramchal, doesn't make any sense. So many things in the world do not make any sense at all. So the Ramchal says with all the difficulty and all the hardship that a person will go through, or other people will go through, whatever it is, it cannot be this world is the ultimate. It can't be, well, whenever a person's going to die, they go in the ground, and they go 6 feet under, and that's it. No. That doesn't make any sense because the world, we messed it up. Because of this messed up world, it can't be. This is the ultimate. Someone's born, let's say, severely handicapped. Or they contract a deadly disease, or whatever it is. And they go through like that type of suffering. They start off the world in a bad way. Tremendously bad way. We're going to see it as a tremendously bad way. We can see good things come out of it, whatever. But in general, we're going to see it as a tragedy. I don't think there's any question. First, going to, if you look at the world in general, all you have to do, which I wouldn't tell anyone to do, right? All you have to do, is watch the news or listen to the news. That's all you have to do. 5 minutes, 10 minutes maximum. You hear what's going on in the world. And 90% of all this is man's inhumanity of man. That's what it is. That's what we see over and over and over again. Every once in a while, you hear like a feel-good story. Someone helps someone else, someone saves someone, this, that, whatever it may be. You'll hear a feel-good story. Okay, but before you've heard this feel-good story, what happens? You've heard about 100,000 stories that are bad. And are horrific. They're not just bad. They're worse than bad. So what's a person's obvious conclusion? This world's a horrible place. People do terrible things. Okay. Well, there are people who do good things. Maybe say they're more bad than good in the world. Okay. But you know what? That's not our calculation. Not our calculation. I had a discussion with my Rebbe many, many years ago. I was talking about, different things going on here in Israel, bus bombings, different things, whatever. And I was very much into politics back in the day, especially with Israeli politics. So that's to do this, and this group is in power. And this. So he stopped me mid-sentence. And he said, listen, I said, are you happy 95% of the time the way God runs the world? Stop me in my tracks. I thought about it, and I said, okay, yeah, probably. He said, the other 5% you're never going to understand in 10 lifetimes. In 10 lifetimes, you'll never understand why this happened, that happened, the other thing happened. So he says, your job is just sit and learn. That's your job. You sit and learn. That's what you do. Go through whatever you can go through. You sit and learn. You let God run the world. You got to put your best foot forward. Okay, you take precautions when you have to take precautions. Very good. Everything else you're never going to understand. You're never going to understand. Maybe in hindsight, one day, maybe you'll be able to piece things together and say, oh, this is the reason this happened, that happened, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Otherwise, it's not about a person who's in power. Right? The prophet says, or King Solomon says, I think in Proverbs, Malachim b'yad Hashem. Hearts of kings are in the hands of God. So whatever decision is being made, whether, Putin going into Ukraine, other things going on in the world, and wars and other things. God's pulling the strings. Obviously, he wants certain things to happen in order to get to his ultimate destination. That is the coming of the Messiah. Very good. How God going to orchestrate it all? That's a good question. Don't really have the answer. Nobody knows. We're very close to the Messiah coming. Very good. How is it going to come? When is it going to come? Nobody knows. How is it going to manifest? Everyone's, maybe people will guess. People say, well, this is going to happen. That's going to happen. I mean, Russia went into Ukraine. Didn't think people thought this is the end of, the end of days. Nuclear weapons, it's and that. You see, hasn't led to anything yet, seemingly. I mean, he's not interested in taking over the world. Mr. Putin himself, right? He wants to make Russia great again. Okay, maybe we'll take a few other places. He ain't invading Europe. He definitely doesn't have delusions of grandeur. That's not his goal. Doesn't seem like his goal. He's not at the moment. Yeah. But everyone, a lot of people are saying this could be the end of days, could have been, in theory. But nobody knows. Certainly nobody knows. But at the same time, okay, person got to take precautions, got to do what you need to do. Very good. That's it. These things, it makes for good talk. But nobody knows. You got these political pundits. They'll say all kinds of things. Maybe some ways they're right. Maybe not. But at the end of the day, Leib Malachim B'Yad Hashem. The hearts of man, the hearts of man are in the hands of God. Rather, the hearts of kings. The hearts of kings are in the hands of God. Now, if the hearts of kings are in the hands of God, who's in control? Who's pulling the strings? God's pulling the strings. Why is he pulling the strings the way he does or whatever? Because that's what he wants. That's what he wants. We understand how it works. Anyone thought, Putin was going to go into Ukraine when he did? Maybe some people would have predicted it. Could be. Right? Maybe a few people in the world might have predicted it. It was going to happen or whatever. Okay. What's the ultimate goal over here? Oh, big mess. Right? Except for the fact there are Jews stuck there. Okay. More than that. People would have said, this is a sign, it's the end of days. It hasn't happened. We're not there. We haven't had the other repercussions. Yeah. Now people talking about, Israel recognizes Somaliland, and now the whole thing with the UAE and, Saudi Arabia. Now the Houthis are getting, they're getting all uptight. But, maybe something could happen through that, maybe. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. But at the end of the day, what's the test? What's the ultimate test? The ultimate test isn't necessarily all the craziness going on, and the immorality and all that. That's part of the test. That's for sure part of the test. But what's the ultimate test? The ultimate test is, for this generation, before the Messiah comes, the ultimate test is in faith and belief in God. That's the test. That is the test. Because, unfortunately, things probably get worse before they get better. Unless, everyone repents, we'll all be playing the guitar, singing Kumbaya, and everything's great. Doesn't seem like that's going to be. Seems like, the whole world is a powder keg. Absolute powder keg waiting to be blown up. Right? You got significant Muslim minorities all over Europe. You got them in the States also, but all over Europe. Strike at any time. And Europe, has negative birth rate, so they can take over different places. It's insanity. Absolute insanity. I have a country like France, a number of years ago, Muslim uprising, they took them 3 weeks. 3 weeks to quiet it down. 3 weeks. It's not a short amount of time. France, you say, wow, it's not the world power it used to be. It doesn't matter. A major world power, regardless. It takes them 3 weeks? Seriously, 3 weeks to calm it down? I mean, you say there are a lot of Muslims there. There are neighborhoods where police won't go in, just like in England, some other place. Yeah. Migrants causing problems everywhere. Everywhere. So the writing's on the wall. How's it going to happen? How's it going to manifest? I don't know. I think the writing's on the wall. I think it's obvious. Yeah, I think it's very obvious. But, how it's going to happen or whatever, we don't know. But we have an obligation to protect ourselves. But there are major questions here. People are going to be dying. People are going to get maimed. Going to happen in Australia. So people say there wasn't enough protection there. There should be more protection. This, that. Okay, right? That could all be true. But again, these are not small things that are happening. It's a wake-up call. They're just being beaten on the streets. You haven't seen this since the early 40s. Late, 1939, 1940. See what happened in Germany and other places. You didn't see such a thing. Jews in America can't go to college. Can't walk into, university being barred by these thugs. That's what I'm going to call them. Without getting into politics, these pro-Palestinian thugs, that's what they are. It's insane. Now you can say, well, all the money from Qatar is going to these places, and it's a breeding place for that. And they're not surprised. Called this out 20 years ago. Okay. But if you told people 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, when I went to college, when I went to university, there will be times you will not be able to get into school because of these pro-Palestinian thugs, right? And not only that, you're gonna need the police as an escort to bring you home, otherwise you're gonna get maimed. Or worse. What would people have said? They would have said, keep dreaming. This is America. This is never gonna happen. Never, I can understand maybe some other place, but even other places, they wouldn't expect it. Never. Okay, so things are heating up. Very good. A person has to be aware. Very good. Okay. But there are going to be a lot of things we said before that are not going to make any sense. They're absolutely going to not make any sense. So you say, okay, so what are we supposed to do? So what's the answer? What's the solution? It's one solution. There's one solution. The one solution is keep learning Torah. That's it. Keep learning Torah. Right? You be the best you can be. You work on character development. Person learns as much as they can. They keep the holidays, if it applies to them. They keep mitzvahs. Whatever applies to them, they be the best people they can be, Jew or non-Jew. That's what we're supposed to do. We need to do what we need to do. We need to let God do what he needs to do. Right? But at the same time, what's the person going to say? It's chaos. Right? It's chaos that way, but chaos the other way. Right? With all the immorality, all kinds of craziness, in the world. What, you're going to teach 8-year-olds they're in the wrong body. That's insanity. So many times, go back and check how many times I said insanity today. Right? It's insane. 100% insane. They say, oh, that's education. Yeah, okay. So for a person to stay on a normal path and keep to what they need to, with all the craziness going around, they are the real heroes. Because this is all being stirred up by the evil inclination. Obviously God wants certain things to happen, okay. When a person looks at it and says, I'm trying to be the best I can be, families give me problems, rabbis give me problems, communities give me problems, I'm getting, hit on all sides, and it's too hard, and it's this, and it's that. Good. These are good questions. You know what the answer is? You gotta sit and learn. That's it. You gotta let, this is all distraction. It's all a major distraction. You have an obligation to guard yourself, true. 100% true. But at the same time, you got to guard yourself spiritually. Right? That's what we have to do. And if you don't do that, you're going to get sucked in. And when you get sucked in, it's very hard to get out. And there are so many things around society that do it, that for anyone to stay in the straight and narrow path, it's not easy. Right? So that's why I would say it's much better to be more insulated, than not, because once you let certain things in, it's very hard to get out. Once things are attached to your psyche, attached to your soul, very hard. I've spoken about this many times. Very, very hard to get out of your system. Very, very hard. Images, things you thought, whatever, it's there. It's part of your psyche now. It's part of your DNA. Once it's part of your DNA, to extricate it, to get rid of it, you can work very hard to bury it. Okay. That's very good. But it doesn't disappear. In other words, the person can probably recall, remember someone put up a post once, a while ago, name the scariest movie ever saw. Other people know, they mentioned all kinds of different movies. Okay. They're all maple. None of this ever happened. Maybe some of them based on true events. Okay, let's say. But so what? None of this ever happens in general. I can't believe they killed this guy. No, it's probably like drinking a beer somewhere, in a bar, having a good time. He didn't die. No, but it looks so, but he didn't die. We have images. We have images. Yeah, but it never happened. So you say, okay, I haven't thought about this image in years, but it's there. It'll disappear. You have something, someone about something they saw maybe 20 years ago, 15 years ago. They can probably tell you certain things verbatim about it. Now, they haven't thought about it in years. In years. How do they remember it? Because part of your psyche. It's there. You get a person like, oh, I don't remember so well. Certain things you remember. And even if you don't remember, someone reminds you, oh yeah, then it triggers a memory. Maybe someone won't remember at all. Okay. But that's the point. All these things, they're an image. They're a thought, whatever. Once that's why we have to be so careful what we see, what we hear. And the reason is the effect it has. You can say, but it doesn't affect me directly. Could, 100%. A person remembers certain things, brings up certain memories, puts you in a certain frame of mind. So it could have a negative effect, right? But you have to work very hard to bury it. Okay. So you got to do, how do I get rid of it? You can't get rid of it, right? That's the punchline. Punchline is you can't get rid of it, right? That is that is the punchline, right? You never really truly get rid of it, but you can bury it. You can bury it and work very hard. That shouldn't come up. That's what you can do, right? And the more you focus on spirituality, right? The more you focus on that, so okay, you got to review. You got to focus on it more. Mitzvah goreres mitzvah, avera goreres avera. More person does the mitzvah, they want to do more mitzvahs. Person transgresses, God forbid you transgress more, very good, or probably not so good, right? But at the end of the day, either you strengthen yourself or you weaken yourself. And that's exactly what the evil inclination wants, right? Now, Adam had a point. Adam had a point, right? If I do I go according to my good inclination, exponentially, it's good for the body and for the soul. True. But if you do the wrong thing, wrong thoughts, this and that, what does it do? It debases the body, it debases the soul. So it's got to be a balance. Very good. So he was right in a certain way, but God said, I didn't create the world for that. But that's the world we live in. That's the hardship. And that's, so I'll even be more depressing. This is a hardship that a person goes through till they die. Till the last second they're alive. It's always a fight between good and evil. Sometimes we'll be more successful against evil. Sometimes we'll be less successful. But it's going to be a constant battle until a person dies. That's the bottom line. It'll be an absolute constant battle. When a person has that constant battle, sometimes it's better, right? Sometimes it's worse, but it makes you who you are. That's what it does. And we have no choice. We're in this world. That's it. We don't have a choice. We have to fight against these things. And again, if you get knocked down, right? A righteous person says, gets knocked down. So you get up, right? Gets knocked down 7 times. He gets up. But the evil inclination will say, stay down. It's too hard. There's no point. You'll never succeed. So we spoke about that last week. Either a person will be so convinced it's too hard, they can't do anything, or they'll convince themselves why maybe it's okay to do, and they'll mess themselves up in other ways, right? So, it goes both ways. It goes the lenient way and the more, stringent way, as we said before. So in general, this is an absolute constant battle. And again, sometimes we do better with the value. We do better with the battle. Sometimes we don't, right? But again, even if we don't, we got to pick ourselves up and be better. That's that's the bottom line. But again, what can it do though? It can make a person feel they can't do anything. Make a person feel like it's futile. There's no point because if I'm doing the best I can, other people aren't. So what am I supposed to do? Right? What am I supposed to do over here? And the answer is Ramchal says, do not get distracted. That's what he says in Derech Hashem. Do not get distracted. Because if you get distracted with these other things, again, that's what the evil inclination wants. If someone says, right, only God is one, duality is very frustrating. You're right. Right? But the fight between good and evil is also frustrating. right? And you see sometimes evil people sometimes have it easy. And other people trying to do the right thing are struggling, and it gets rubbed in your face. That's hard. That's hard. Someone goes to a funeral, their father died, and stepfather says, he's got plenty of money, his kid's got plenty of money. He's like, at your age, you shouldn't be struggling so much. That's something someone wants to hear. That they're the funeral of a parent. Someone's like digging into them after the fact. It's like, you shouldn't be struggling, you must be doing something wrong. Your husband must not have any, business acumen. He must, there are a lot of reasons people struggle. That's not the point. Yeah. But hear from some stuck up secular Jew, doesn't know the Aleph Beis, right? Doesn't know the Aleph Beis and rubs it in your face. That's hard to take. You want this person to just get struck down by lightning and say, oh, you think you're God's gift to the world? Right? The famous rich person that died in his own vault. He said, I got so much money, right? We always say, Al tiftach peh l'satan. You never open up your mouth to Mr. S. This guy said, I have so much money, I'll never die with my money. God made an example out of him. What happened? Went in the bank vault, right? On a Friday afternoon, people forgot about him, door locked from behind. No cell service. No one coming in until Monday. Guess what? Can't eat money. Can't eat gold. Yeah? What happened? He died. Died in the vault. Died in the vault with all his money. God's irony, so to speak. Yeah? You better be careful. Better be very, very careful what you say. But, imagine. This big shot says, oh, I got so much money. I got so much money, no possible way I'd ever die with it. So God says, oh, really? You think there's no possibility? None at all. Okay, I'll give you a scenario. Yeah, I'll put you with all your money stuck in a vault. And guess what? You can bang against the wall, ain't going to help you. No one coming in for 72 hours. Good as dead. Yeah, that's what happened. That's what happened. So we always say, Al tiftach peh. You never open your mouth. Never open your mouth to Mr. S. Because you never know what can be, right? Let's look at the scenario. Yeah. So the person, I'll never die with my money. Comes on the evil inclination, Satan, the angel of death, whatever you want to call him, goes in front of God and says, you let this person get away with this? What he blasphemes, look at what he says, this and that, he thinks it's God's gift to the world. Goes, okay, you're right. You're right, we're going to take him now. Yeah? And this is the way we're going to take him. You convince him to go into the vault. Go check his money, whatever. And that's how we're going to take him. You're going to take him in his own vault. Horrible way to go. So, maybe better ways, worse ways. But imagine, you got billions of dollars, let's say. And you're looking at all your money. You're looking at all your stocks. You're looking at, I don't know, whatever. Jewels, whatever you have. Whatever you have. And you say, wow, look at all this money. Look how powerful. And you're stuck in a stinking vault. No possible way to get out. Probably had regret he said that. Maybe. Yeah, if that would have been regret, then yeah, maybe, maybe at the end of the day, yeah, maybe would have got atonement for it. But anyway, gotta be careful what you say. So yeah, I'm gonna stop here. I do this every Saturday, 2 o'clock Eastern time, 9 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions? Find me on Facebook at Michael Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com. Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos and Q&As, Ethics of Our Fathers, Book of Leviticus, or send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBI, @gmail.com. Wish have a good middle of the day, end of the day, depending where